Assalamu alaikum students. I'm here with a new lecture on postmodernism with reference to its important works. Our first work is the novel Beloved. This novel is written by Toni Morrison and published in 1987. She won Pulitzer Prize for this particular novel. Students, before proceeding further, I want to set a critical background for you all to understand the main stance of this novel, and that is related to the statement given by Frederick Jameson in his most famous book, Postmodernism and Consumer Society. As you know, that Frederick Jameson is one of the representative authors of postmodernism. So he gave the statement that postmodern society has reached the end of its awareness of history. According to the critics, this was not at all a plain saying, or you may say that this was not at all a saying for the sake of the saying, but it generated great controversy. In the meanwhile, Morrison also asked the similar question about the postmodern society's understanding of history. And now I will give you some instances from the story of the novel Beloved, and you will match that clues with the statement given by Frederick Jameson, and you will also know why Morrison stressed on following that particular statement. The story is related to ex-slave's relationship with her children, herself, and the world around them. There are two considerations about the historical accuracy of the novel. The first is the use of contemporaneous accounts of slavery, and the second, Morrison's imaginative recreation of the slave society. First is about the basic concept of slavery, and the second is imaginative recreation of slave society. The conflict between these two arises when the concern that version of slavery written by the ruling white class is flawed, and that is fictional story is by definition unreal. So keep this thing in your mind that the ruling class will write something for the slaves that will all the time be uh, there to be accepted by the ruling class. And because slavery was the main concept of that time's writings, and ruling class was the whites, and the whites were superior, as well as they were more powerful as compared to the blacks or Afro-American people. And the version of slavery which was written by the white class, that was flawed, that was fictional, and that was not real. There are two events in the novel related to main characters, Paul D and Seth, and these two events will raise the same issue. The first is the moment when Paul D sees the newspaper clipping of Seth and remarks, "That ain't her mouth." If the news reports are not accurate, including the pictures, then the novel has relied on flawed data and it is thereby flawed. The second incident is the scene in which Beloved lures Paul D into the shed to have sex. There is a stack of newspapers in the shed. A symbolic juxtaposition of the real and the imagined world is also presented in this scene. And we can say that post-structuralist view that reality is a function of discourse is challenged in these two scenes, because the resources, which are newspapers, photos, fictional accounts of events, these are the sources of discourse which are unreliable. And that unreliable sources lead to the conclusion that there is no reliable explication of reality present in these scenes and by extrapolation in the novel itself. Second work is Cat's Cradle. It is written by Kurt Vonnegut, who and published in 1963. Kurt Vonnegut defies easy categorization and hence called an eclectic postmodernist writer. But the difficulty of identifying him or his works within a trend or movement remains there. If we can quote one work which became the main cause of his fame, that is his book which published in 1974, Vampeters, Foma and Granfalloon's Opinions. And these concepts are also found in Cat's Cradle, which is our main concern. But before proceeding towards Cat's Cradle, we have to give an account of Vampires, Foma, and Granfalloons because uh, although this book published in 1974, but it set a sort of background that people forced themselves to read Cat's Cradle, which published in 1963. So, what sort of that book was? This book was based on opinion, uh, which gave different three most important aspects of the writing of Vonnegut. Number one, vampires are objects around which the lives of otherwise unrelated people revolve. For example, we may quote the Holy Grail or the National Championship. Former are harmless, comforting truths such as prosperity is just around the corner, or you may say there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and also everything is going to be all right. Third one, Granfalloons are a proud and meaningless association of human beings. For example, the veterans of future wars are the class colors committee. In many of his works, Vonnegut pokes fun at the strangeness of normal life and the grand institutions of society. He infuses his novels with a sense of humor, with the exception of Slaughterhouse Wife, which is based on the bombing of Dresden during World War II. Now we will come towards our main concern, Cat's Cradle, and I'll tell you this story in a nutshell. Cat's Cradle is a humorous and sharp edged novel that takes major institutions of society to task for their rapidity and shallowness. What are these institutions? These are as religion, the military, and science. Jonah, the main character, lives in the Caribbean where the only religion tolerated in Bokokonism, this is the religion which is followed by the people, and this was the only religion which was permitted to be followed. It is based on the teachings and songs of Bokonon, most of which are the Caribbean dialect and sung to a calypso beat. Jonah, the main character, finds out about a corrupted production of crystals at a chemical plant that change the way ice crystals are formed. The book tackles the problems of science gone awry, a military that saw an opportunity for a doomsday weapon, and the religion that tried to make some philosophic sense of it all. The chief image in this novel comes from its title, A Cat's Cradle, the finger game played by two people with a loop of string that can become twisted and tangled and end of the game. But if the game is played correctly, it will return to its original form and all will be well, like Foma, as we discussed earlier. Third important work is Kanjor, Selected Poems 1963 to 1970. Ishmael Reed is the writer of this particular work, and it contains prose poems, didactic poems, and short poems offering comments on very specific incidents. You may quote any of his poems, like Report of the Reed Commission. Not all of his poetry is transparent and humorous. Some, like Catechism of the Neo American Hoodoo Church, explore what he sees as the oppressive culture of the American society in which he lives. His reference to hoodoo, which is varied form of voodoo, uh, mm, uh, is a common theme in most of his writings. It combines aspects of conjuring, magic, and voodoo. Black magic, you may say, which he claims will help African Americans or Afro Americans and people in the third world rid themselves of the oppressive nature of contemporary Western civilization. Throughout his poems, he uses a kind of written language that more completely approximates the language of common people. And another technique in the poems, which is related to Ishmael Reed, is the repetition of lines or phrases or words to emphasize the passage. These repetitions derive from an oral tradition of storytelling, learning scriptures, and hymns. Next work is Of Grammatology. Of Grammatology was written by Derrida in 1967, and it was a very difficult book on deconstruction. As you know, that the beginnings of deconstruction are found in Derrida's introduction to his 1962 French translation of German philosopher Edmund Husserl's Origin of Geometry, and were later expanded in two major works of grammatology, which published in 1967, and Writing and Difference, published also in the same year. Of Grammatology is a difficult book that contains the basis for deconstructive analysis of language. Two of the more important issues raised in this book are logocentrism of language and the use of binary oppositions or binary sets in Western culture. What is logocentrism according to Derrida? Logocentrism gives precedence to the spoken word over the written word. He says that philosophies that claim that speech is a more natural from language give speech the position of primacy. By doing so, writing is reduced to a secondary position. His argument is not that writing is not secondary, but that speech is not primary. A tricky way of equalizing these two components of language without setting up another binary set. Some may claim that writing is merely recorded speech, but Derrida argues that opposite, that speech is a form of unrecorded script. The specific concern that he raises in this discussion is what he calls centering, the process of giving one term, the first of a set, more importance than another. You may say in the male and female, day and night. The term which comes first, that is the central point or centering, and we are giving more importance to the first term. He shows that any text, no matter what kind, can be read in ways different from what it seems to be saying, which is central proposition in his book. Communication is an unending series of textual meanings that arise and are subverted within themselves. Then the process repeats. The result of these repeated subversions of meaning is that no text is ever stable. Any stability in a text is merely illusory. The basis of his discussion is a signifier signified relationship that comes from structuralism. He raises the specter of the difficulties of interpreting the relationships between the signifier, the word, and the signified, the object or the concept or the image. This is the problem of writing, where a written word represents a spoken word that in turn represents the object. The movement from the one to the other is the structure of the meaning, but because this movement conceals and erases itself during the very act of movement, it remains unstable. The reader says there is not a single signified that escapes, even if recaptured. The play of signifying references that outside language, that constitute language. Hence, since a text has so many different meanings, it cannot have one single meaning. So, meanings are not fixed. Meanings are different from language to language, from community to community. This is the basic conundrum of deconstruction. The very act of deconstruction is unstable and the results are indeterminate. Next work is Gravity's Rainbow. Pynchon's postmodern novel Gravity's Rainbow, published in 1973, it is set at the end of World War II and tells the story of a quest to find the Schwarzgurt, an unknown device that will be installed in a special rocket. Gravity's Rainbow is considered a difficult book to read because of its unconventional approach to plot, its cast of more than 400 characters, and its use of specialized scientific knowledge. This book has attracted both admiration and criticism. It won the National Book Award in 1974, but its recommendation for a Pulitzer Prize in Literature was uh, vetoed by the Pulitzer Board, and Pynchon's novel narrowly missed winning just because of its unconventional approach towards plot, towards its characters, as well as towards its specialized scientific knowledge. And now the work is overnight to many distant cities. This work is written by Barthel in 1983, and it is based on several notable short stories which show the minimalist character of Barthel's writing style. What is minimalism? It is a style that uses a small amount of text to create the tale. What are its characteristics? Much of this story consists of short, rapid fire sentences, some of which have only three words, giving the reader a sense of urgency. In this way, Barthelme retells the history of the Spanish conquest of Mexico using themes of trust and breaking trust. Themes of trust as well as breaking trust related to the history of Spanish conquest of Mexico. In another story from the same collection, The First Thing the Baby Did Wrong is a humorous parable about the difficulties of living with immutable rules. A family of the three has a rule that the child will be confined to its room for 4 hours for every page that is torn out of a book. This rule backfires because the child tears pages out at every chance the child gets. Finally, the child owes the parents 88 hours. The narrator says if you made a rule, you had to stick to it. This point take us to the absurdity of a society that lives by rules that are not understood or well thought out before they are enforced. It is based on the absurdity of our life that the life will become completely absurd if the rules are only enforced by powerful class or by the government, and they are not at all understood by the people. So, for the enforcement of proper rules in society or in any country, the powerful class or the elite class or the ruling class must try to take common people into confidence. Next important work is Postmodernism and Consumer Society. This is an essay by Frederick Jameson, and it was published in 1983. Frederick Jameson explains his idea of postmodernism, its basic principles, and what caused it to occur in this particular essay. He discusses what he calls pastiche and schizophrenia as they relate to the emergent social order of late capitalism. Pastiche, according to Jameson, is the loss of personal identity, which may be the result of capitalism and bureaucracies that take place no importance on the individual people, or you may say that they place no importance on the individuals in that society where capitalism is running in all aspects. Another aspect of this loss of identity lies in the possibility that there is no way for writers and artists to create new styles because they have already been invented. The other focus of the essay, Schizophrenia, is the clash of narratives resulting from the combination of the past and the future in the present. I'm repeating, the combination of the past and future in the present. Throughout this essay and many other essays like this, Jameson takes considerable notice of the impact of capitalism on the course of social progress and current artistic expressions. Last work is Desire in Language, a semiotic approach to literature and art. This is a significant work by Julia Kristeva. She introduces gender politics into the postmodern discussion in this work or with the help of this work. This first published in French in 1969 and later translated into English in 1980. In this work, she proposes that unconscious drives are major factors in communication and language. She also explains that in creating a text by writing, the author releases unconscious selves and destroys the former notion of a solid, traditional, logical self. She considers the formative possibilities of a feminine voice that can result. Julia Kristeva looks at this issue of the feminine voice in the context of the dissolution of binary sets discussed by Jacques Derrida. She asserts that if customary language usage privileges one sex over another, as in the male or female set, it opens up the possibility of the marginalized sex eventually being eliminated from all discussions, though at the same time it provides means for women to raise their concerns if they use their status outside the mainstream. So, whatever Derrida said so far as binary opposition in Western culture was concerned, Julia Kristeva took one main and major consideration that was related to issue of identity, and she claimed that particular issue in this work, and she also proved the possibility of marginalized sex, that is the voice of women. This was all about the important works of postmodernism. Thank you very much for being with me.